Everything you need to know about founders and co-founders for startups, how to find and manage co-founders, part 2. Again, referencing an article from stars.com, actually 2 articles, bonus, pretty much say the same thing, just from different angles. I will link those in the description. Feel free to check them out. Do yourself a favor, go check them out anyway. But I'm going to give an overview of how to find and manage co-founders from my own personal experience. Once again, multiple startups. I think I've started or been a co-founder of 7 fully funded startups and then exited out of 2. And some of them are completely blown apart because of co-founder issues. So I'm very careful with co-founders right now. I've had some great co-founders and I have some great co-founders now, but I've had some co-founders from the 7th pit of hell and great people, but horrible co-founders. Okay. So here we go. Again, startups.com, check it out. Free labor is a bad reason. This is the worst reason to offer a co-founder a position as a co-founder. And I've been stuck in this situation before. So what happens is you're not a technical founder. You have this idea for an app and you're like, I need to get someone who's going to be a CTO. And then we're going to offer them a percentage of the company to come on board. Bad reason. Not a good reason whatsoever, because what happens is that person has a lot of leverage and there's reasons for an individual to kind of hold the company hostage, or if there's chemistry issues between the founder and the co-founder, then everybody feels bad because you brought them in for free labor. So what happens is you say, okay, you can program this and I can't pay you any money. So then I'm going to give you whatever, 50% of the company, 40%, 10% of the company. Now that's a negotiation. What happens in that person's mind? Well, I'm important. You can't do this company without me. You don't have money. So technically you don't even have a company. So now it's a negotiation of who owns what. And it's almost like a mercenary situation. And if you don't offer them enough and you're not in agreement, etc., it's a sticky situation. Plus, if you come to an agreement and something falls apart later on, let's say that person gets a job and says, well, I only got 10% of the company and I have all the technical capabilities and I put all this labor in and I'm not getting anything out of it. I'm just going to ditch the startup and go get a job, etc. Like, it's just really sticky. And that's the worst reason, therefore, to go get a co-founder. You're better off served waiting to get a co-founder, which we'll talk about how you go do that, or just bootstrapping, saving the money and hiring somebody, because a lot of times these issues can be addressed just by hiring someone. And it's because the founder, you haven't thought through enough how to solve that problem. You automatically think, I need a co-founder. Another really bad reason is I'm lonely. Okay. It's a good reason to get a co-founder because you can share the emotional load, but I'm lonely. And so therefore some people like bring on their friends because they want camaraderie. Very bad reason to get a co-founder. And that falls under the free labor camp. In terms of free emotional labor, yeah, not going to fly, especially in the long term, puts too many liabilities and so much potential for something to go wrong. Bad reason. Okay. The best reason is that that person is going to be a good co-founder. So let's talk about the real reason. So I've seen this kind of batted around before where some people say it's like a marriage. And so you should treat it like a marriage. So don't go have a shotgun wedding. It never works. And I agree with that advice. Very rarely will you show up at a hackathon or put on an ad and then suddenly meet the perfect co-founder for you. Not going to happen, right? But then I've seen people say, well, is it a pro sports team? You're right. And this is the concept of culture at Netflix. They say we're not a family, we're a sports team. People can trade it off. It's kind of in the middle. I would say it's like a sports team that is run by married people, or it's a married a married group, people who are married. And this sounds really weird, but platonically, right? Sure. I'm sure husband and wives can be great co-founders. I've never seen that work out either, but too many complications. But I digress. It's like married people saying we're going to play on a sports team together and we're going to follow the rules of the sports team. What do I mean? Well, it is like a marriage in the sense that the most important thing that you want to figure out about potential co-founders is how they handle stress and how they handle setbacks, because that's where co-founder relationships start to fall apart. Money gets tight, someone starts running out of personal runway, something happens, etc. And then what do? They start fighting, just like a regular marriage. And so the question is, when you're getting married and you say till death do us part, through rich and poor, thick and thin, sickness and health. I don't think the thick and thin is a real thing. At least I didn't add that in my vows. But how do you handle that stress? How do you handle that unknown medical bill, or suddenly, you lose your job and all those things start to happen? Well, how do you bond together, and can you provide each other the emotional support to get through those tough times? And believe me, there are going to be tough times in every startup. Every startup is a complete gong show with problem after problem after problem. And sometimes you get a big victory, or you get a break from problems with a crisis. It's like sometimes working tirelessly for years and years and years to become an overnight success is really what it comes down to. And the emotional toll that it takes, sometimes it's great to just be able to lean on each other. So just like in a marriage, in my marriage, sometimes I'm up and my wife is down, and I add my strength to hers. I give her emotional capacity, and sometimes she's up. Most of the time she's up. She's more up than me, and I need her emotional capacity, and she's my greatest resource right there. So it's like a marriage. But at the same time, you don't want it to be like a marriage in the sense that you don't want to ignore the fact that everybody has to perform. So in a marriage, you don't vote each other off the island. But on a sports team, you have to perform. Like, I don't care who the captain is or how long of a contract you've signed. You have to be scoring goals, and you have to be doing your job. So you have to agree that we are going to perform together. And if we don't, we're really willing to dissolve the team or move people out, trade your best player if the chemistry is wrong, etc. And so that's where the pro sports team analogy mixes. So the key is, when you want to get a good co-founder, well, can you see them dealing with problems the same way that you do? Do you share the same values and providing that emotional support, that connection, like a marriage? But are you willing to perform and agree to performance together like a pro sports team? And how do you find that person? It's not that simple. It's complicated, like all relationships can be. Sometimes, you find someone that you've been known since childhood, and you call them up, and you just happen to have complementary skills, and you have a good times. Sometimes you volunteered together. Sometimes you worked on other projects. Sometimes you've worked together in other jobs. Sometimes you just meet someone at that hackathon, and then you spend months having beers talking. Yeah, we could solve a problem this way, that way. That's the best time, because you spend time getting to know each other and seeing how they're going to react to stressful situations. Oftentimes, you'll know someone at work, and you'll go to start a company, and that person will stay at work, and you'll just get together for beers, bowling night, poker night, whatever, just a gab fest, and you walk dogs together, right? Or your kids play together. And then they're talking about the stress and different things like that. And then what happens is like, hey, you should come over and work for me. I just secured some funding, etc. I need a co-founder who's going to take on this responsibility. And that could be a match made in heaven. You never know. And so that's where I personally advocate for lots of group dating. What do I mean by this? When young people fall into torrid romance, I say spend time in groups, because you can observe how you interact with each other. It's the same thing. You want to observe how people interact with their teams and how they treat people, etc. So you don't get this weird kind of relational bonding, strange dynamic between you two. So observe people and how they handle stress in their life and how they handle performance, because a lot of times you'll bring on co-founders because of the potential. You can't do that. What happens if that potential doesn't work, and then you've given them half of your company? You want to make it a sports team. So you want to talk about performance versus potential. Now, here's the thing. This is where I'm going to strongly suggest, when it comes to co-founders, and keep this in mind, because we're going to talk about these points as we go. Let me pull out my trusty pen here. I want you to look at vesting schedules when it comes to co-founders and cliffs. You will save yourself so much headache if you haven't heard of these before. Vesting schedules and cliffs. That's how you protect these co-founder relationships from going awry over a period of time, and make sure that everyone stays accountable And every co-founder, I'm the type of person, I want every co-founder to go on a vesting schedule in Cliff. When I invest in a company or our fund invests in a company, we look at that. And we look, is every co-founder willing to go on a vesting schedule in Cliff, meaning they earn their shares. And if they leave sooner than they earn their shares, they don't get their shares. And that way they can't hold the company hostage, but at least they're rewarded for the work that they put in, over a period of 4 years. So again, like I said, do yourself a favor, go look up vesting schedules and cliffs. All right, so let's keep going. We figured out how to find the right co-founder and the mindset you want to be in. How many co-founders? Well, it's complicated. So can single founder companies work? Absolutely. They can work. I've seen it happen. And I have some startups where I'm currently the solo founder, and I like it that way because fundamentally, I just don't think I need someone. So I'm a little bit technical. I can prototype, I can get something off the ground, and I'd rather get to the place where I validate the startup as a solo founder. But we talked about the emotional toll and different things. If you are going to build a unicorn startup, eventually you're going to need co-founders or you're going to need a team because there's no way you can handle even the fundraise. In fundraising, typically one person is doing all the fundraising and one person is trying to keep the company traction going because that's what investors are going to look like. So if you're raising money and your company slowly starts to die and all your customers churn, well, what's the point in raising money? And so a lot of founders say, I can't raise money and run my startup at the same time. And the answer is, yeah, we know. Of course. And that's the reason you would use a co-founder or you would find a team to do that. And also typically co-founders are the ones who should be raising capital. You don't want to, I've seen startups with co-founders and founders hire like a CEO to raise capital. It doesn't go well. The motivations, answering the questions, the representation, it just looks weird from an investor standpoint, right? If I'm an investor and I'm listening to a pitch, and thankfully I've never had this happen before, but I know situations where it's occurred and CEOs pitch me, and I'm like, okay, so are you a co-founder? No, I've just been hired to raise money. I'm going to start questioning, the founders and the co-founders, the real co-founders' motivation. I'm going to look at the cap table. I'll get suspicious. So 2 is the minimum if you want to build a unicorn startup. Ideally, for me, if you want to grow a massive startup, 3 co-founders is great. It is a sweet spot number. Here's the reason. It allows a third leg to the tripod instead of, 2 legs, which, you can fall over. Think of it this way. Let me digress for a moment. To me, walking is nothing but falling forward and catching yourself with one leg really fast. And you just fall forward and you catch yourself and you keep your momentum going. And so you're just falling forward. Well, ultimately, you can fall on your face if one of your legs is not working. Okay. And therefore, having a tripod to me is a stable configuration. And so what happens is if 2 co-founders, aren't digging each other, then a third co-founder can, step in place and sort of do that split vote and provide a little bit of balance and see. So, but you just have to make sure everybody's pulling their weight and everybody feels good about the contribution that they're giving and it's equal. Okay. Then what happens is if you really, really have a heavy lift, I've seen 4 co-founders work, but typically what happens is one person is the founder, and then there are 3 co-founders that get together and are kind of like supporting. They're almost like the founding team, but they're incentivized and they support the leader, and the leader just kind of, provides a vision and all those things. That's some stuff that I've seen when there's 4, but 4, it's tough. There's a lot of people there. And we're going to talk about that affects your cap table. Speaking of which, okay, we're going to get to that. The 4 co-founders, then the titles get all wonky. So you better make sure. So it's very rare that you have 4 co-founders and one person, the perfect CEO, COO, CFO, and CMO, or, something like that. So sometimes there's a lot of overlap when there's 4 co-founders. So Hence, getting back to 3 seems to really work well. One person's the visionary, one person's hacking away, and one person's, running the business or managing the finances or doing all the support. Who knows, what happens. So what titles, it really depends on what's going to work. But the goal is make it a conversation. So talk amongst everyone and figure out. For me, I'd rather say, let's just use the co-founder title in the beginning until we raise investment and people actually want to see an official org chart. That's my experience. And again, if you watch my previous video, I'm not big on titles anyway. I just don't care. So what about late co-founders? This is a tough one because what happens is late co-founders, they can come in and it's like, ooh, this person's really pulling weight and we're going to make them a co-founder. Well, what's that going to do to the rest of your team? 10 says a lot if you've been in the beginning. Like I've been in a startup where I've gone like a year and I've gone through like the trough of sorrow and it's on the up and up. And suddenly people want to join and be co-founders. They want to ride the gravy train. And I start to feel a little resentful, right? And I'm sure first employees or people who've been around longer will start to feel resentful and you start affecting the culture because I'm like, okay, I took the biggest risk. And I've been in this situation before where I've worked on a product for so long and then someone's come in and said, now I get to own an equal part of it. And I say, I'm the one who's invested in this, took all the major risk. And so I'm not feeling very good. I don't feel really good about this situation. I'm struggling, right? So you want to be careful with late co-founders. Here's how you get around it. Talk to everyone. Because sometimes you bring in someone, they were like, hallelujah, this is the exact person that we wanted. And we're willing to give up equal parts of the company. Like I've been in situations where I've had a larger amount of shares and someone's come in and I've said, you know what, I'm going to actually even out and give this person, equal amount of shares that I have because I can't see myself being as successful without this person. And so even though they might come into the conversation late as a co-founder, I do treat them like a co-founder and I'm willing to make the sacrifice to make sure that they're incentivized. So that's, how that works. Okay. Now, how do we manage co-founder conflict? All right. So let me talk about how you decide who gets how much of the company. And that's where vesting schedules and cliffs are going to be important to understand. Some people are like, you know what? Nobody deserves everybody to be equal, especially bringing people on, later. And I understand that. Like if you're the one and you got a co-founder coming in later, well, they shouldn't get equal like we just talked about. But if you're all at the beginning and you want everybody to be incentivized, for me personally, I like to be equal owners with everybody on vesting schedules and cliffs. All right. Again, look that up. Vesting schedules and cliffs, because I want everybody to take as much ownership and be as incentivized as I am. But that's very dangerous because what happens if they're not? Like, for example, say that, you and I were 50-50 and I find myself doing 51% of the work and you do 49% of the work. Well, over the long term, that 51% adds up and I start to get resentful and say, why am I giving you 50% of the company when I'm doing 51% of the work, type thing. And so you have to be very careful. With that being said, I've had amazing co-founders. I have one right now where I am more than happy to share 50% because of the value they bring to the table, especially in a complementary skill set. Especially they know things that I do not know, and they save my bacon more often than not. I had a technical co-founder. I know a technical co-founder, and I don't know if he ever watches any of my videos. His name's Nick. He helped me, with one of my startups that eventually got acquired. We went down to Y Combinator together. We interviewed together and all those things. But I would give him 50% of any company that I had, that he wanted to work on. What's the reason? He has proven himself. Like the guy stays up late at night thinking about how to solve problems even before I have to ask. And he defers to me on the vision and all those things. And I defer to him. He'll tell me, Ed, I think we need to start using this coding language or start, swapping this. I go, okay. And he'll tell me the reason why. And I'll be like, walk me through and educate me. And he teaches me stuff. Like he's actually sat beside me. And, I'm going to get all emotional and misty here, but we sat inside Starbucks and he's taught me how to code. He has mentored me and he said, Ed, if you ever want to jump in and take a look, this is how you do it. And you can, change, a little bit of text on the app. And I'm like, wow, I really appreciate it. To this day, I say I would give him 50% of every company. We would both go on vesting schedule and cliffs. I hate to sound like a broken record, but it's so important. Say it over again. Okay. Vesting schedules and cliffs, vesting schedule and cliffs. Try to say that 5 times really fast just to, drive yourself crazy. So that's one way how you handle co-founder conflict is vesting schedule and cliffs. And you figure out what is the operating agreement between the two of you and put it in writing. Right. And that's what these contracts are all about. So I always have co-founder agreements. You agree that you're going to do this. And we're going to talk about how you might get fired. The board might decide. Another way to avoid co-founder conflict is to actually get a board. Okay. Even at the beginning stages, I get one person, chairman on the board that me and our co-founders trust. And I say, we will do whatever you tell us to do in terms of you being the split vote if we happen to be at a logjam type thing. So I'll use board members to help me with co-founder conflict. All right. Let's summarize. How do you handle co-founder conflict? 1, have a lot of conversations, build that chemistry. 2, clarify titles, vesting schedule, cliffs, who's going to do what to earn what of the company, etc., and make sure that you're in it as a married group playing pro sports and performance. So get all that up front. One advice that I say is hope for the best, plan for the worst. Have conversations. We're going to have a hope for the best, plan for the worst conversation. Okay. Then what you do is get it all in an operating agreement, put it in writing, everybody signs so that in case there's misunderstandings, you can go back to a document and then finally get a board member, someone who can help that everybody trusts and agrees with. I'm going to share something a little personal. My wife and I, we have an agreement and we've never had to use this, thank God. And maybe this is the reason that if we ever disagreed on something so strongly and we couldn't come to a compromise resolution, we've picked one person that we both trust and we say, we're going to present our problems to them and then do whatever they tell us to do. No questions asked. And we made that agreement. And I think doing that helped us go, okay, we know I don't want to eventually have to go for arbitration to the adjudicator. It wasn't that scary, but it was a professional individual. And that could be the same effect. Now, it doesn't have to be as serious, like, I'm doing it in my marriage. We're going to do whatever this person wants. No, but we're going to subject ourselves or we're going to agree to the authority of the chairman of the board of a board. And we're going to do everything by the numbers, etc. If you think there could be potential co-founder conflict that could be resolved at that level. Worst case scenario, you put in your contracts, this is how we do arbitration, and you spell it out. Now, hopefully you don't have to get there, but like I said, hope for the best, plan for the worst. You'd rather have and not need than need and not have in terms of all of these clauses and these outs and these contingency plans for how you manage co-founder conflict. There you have it. That's how you find amazing co-founders and you manage them and you manage the relationship. Everything might start off amazing, but trust me, over time, it really, it gets to you. Like just sharing a personal story. In fact, I got a message today and a co-founder told me, he said, do you know, we've known each other for 26 years and we haven't always worked together for 26 years. There's been times we've gone our separate ways, but we've come back together for different types of ventures. And I was like, wow. And, he was sharing, that's literally half my life. I met you at 26. I'm now 52. And half my life we've been partners in ventures. And I go, yeah, that's pretty cool. And, you can't get to that if you haven't put in the proper mechanisms to manage the relationships that you're building. I admire the relationships that I see at startups.com, the 3 co-founders, Will, Ryan, and Elliot. And they're very clear on what they do. And they're like a well-oiled machine, but they're still very similar and they can overlap. And there's lots of chaos and strong personalities. I sometimes wonder, I'm sure they probably want to kill each other in beginning phases, but they've gotten so good and they probably had the agreements and, all these things set in a place to help them manage and get to the point where they've got such a great team, put together. And I got to tell you, having those co-founders as part of startups.com and watching them gives me a lot more comfort to spend my time and be an advisor at startups.com because I know the company's stable. And so you never want to take for granted that your employees, even your customers, will watch the interactions between the co-founders on how they establish culture, they establish the brand, the employer brand, and how engaged the employees are going to be and how much I want to commit, because a lot of people want to be a part of that kind of camaraderie, that co-founder culture that's established when people are starting companies together. And so if you got great co-founders and you manage those relationships, it's just really great for your startup in the future. So those are some things to consider, talk about. That's part 2. Like I said, check out the article right there. And if you're part of the startups.com community-based accelerator online, just ask for your office hours. If something in this video comes up, you can leave a comment on this video, but if something comes up, just contact us or book your office hours. We have lots of advisors that work people through these co-founder issues, power dynamics, different things like that. Do it. You'll thank yourself. Even if you're like, hey, I just want to have a conversation and maybe talk about some potential things or some things that are on my mind, you'd rather just get that off your chest, like just address it. And you'll do so much better. You'll be much more relaxed when working with your co-founders. Or if you're finding co-founders, go for it. That was your video. Hope this series was helpful for you. I'll see you in the next series, the next video, where I start to teach you more things about doing startups.